Record reflect the presence of counsel, the defendant, and the jury. Mr. Barker, you may call your next witness.
State calls Detective Warren.
Do you solemnly swear, under penalty of perjury, the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, it's Lauren Nagele.
And your last name spelled?
It's spelled Nagele.
And you're the case agent, is that right?
Yes.
That means you're the lead detective involving the murder of Sasha Krause, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, is it your understanding that you'll be called later in this trial as well about the entire investigation?
Yes.
All right. So for this morning, I just want to talk about a few subjects. As a case agent, you receive certain certified documents, is that right?
That's correct.
All right. Let's go through some of those in no particular order. Did you receive certified tower records, that's cell phone site records for AT&T?
Yes.
And that would have been for which area? What are we talking about? What towers?
Well, there were several towers, but they were in the general areas of Farmington, near the Mennonite community that we've been discussing, in the area of the Four Corners, and in the area north of Flagstaff.
All right. And then you received certified phone records for Mark Gooch, cell phone number 715-610-3215. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Also AT&T records, correct?
Yes, they are.
And then what about certified phone records for Sasha Krause, cell phone number 254-205-0873?
Yes.
Is that also an AT&T record?
Yes.
And then did you receive certified documents for a financial record from American Express referencing Mark Gooch?
Yes.
And then finally, a certified Google record for Mark Gooch with an email address of mgooch6666@gmail.com.
Yes, I did.
All right. I'm going to approach Your Honor with permission.
You may.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I have the right numbers here. All right, Detective, just so we can verify the records. I'm going to show you what's been marked first as Exhibit 79. Take a minute to load up. All right, do you see that?
Yes, I do.
All right. Can you identify as the American Express record you received for Mark Gooch?
Yes, it is.
All right. Move to admit Exhibit 79.
Any objection?
Sorry.
Objection? Sorry. 79 is admitted.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Exhibit 80, and I'll, again, Your Honor, if I could approach
Okay.
with these exhibits. identify what Exhibit 80 is?
These are going to be the tower records that I referenced.
All right. And these are certified documents you received for AT&T tower records, right?
Yes.
Move to admit Exhibit 80.
Any objection? 80 is admitted.
Let's go to Exhibit 81. I can approach again, Judge?
You may.
Thank you. Again, this is Exhibit 81. Can you identify this?
Yes, this is the location deletion history report for mgooch6666@gmail.com.
All right. This was received from Google, is that correct?
Yes.
To admit Exhibit 81.
Any objection? One's admitted.
All right, that should do it for the electronic exhibits. Let's move to Exhibit 183. Good approach, Judge.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Take a look at Exhibit 83 and tell the jury if you can identify, please.
These are the certified phone records from AT&T for the phone number of 715-610-3215, which is Mark Gooch's phone number.
Move to admit 183.
183 is admitted.
Let me show you what's been marked as Exhibit 184. Can you identify this?
These are the certified phone records from AT&T for phone number 254-205-0873, which was Sasha Krause's phone number.
All right, move to admit 184.
Sorry, no objection? Sorry, I'm just having trouble hearing. Let me get my, thanks. All right, 184 is admitted.
Thank you. Now, Detective, you also reviewed the cell phone extraction report for Mark Gooch, is that right?
I did.
We heard a little bit about that from Adrian Morales, I believe it was yesterday. There were two photos referenced in that report that were taken on the day of January 18, 2020. You recall that?
I do.
All right. If I could approach again. Showing you what's been marked. It's exhibits 117, 118. You recognize those?
Yes, I do.
All right. Are those the photos that were taken from Mark Gooch's cell phone on January 18, 2020?
Yes.
All right, move to admit 117 and 118.
Any objection?
No objection.
117 and, I'm sorry, strike that. 117 and 118 are admitted.
Thank you. All right, finally, let me show you one other exhibit that's been admitted already. This would be exhibit 149. Now again, we'll talk to you later about the body that was discovered, Sasha Krause's body, but let me first ask you a question about the location. So this was referenced by Detective Luna. Do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Right. And 149 shows a red marker. What does that red marker indicate?
The red marker indicates the,
Excuse me, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can the bailiff please dim the lights? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
that's okay. The red dot on that map represents the location where Sasha Krause was found deceased, and that's marked with GPS coordinates.
All right, so that's an accurate, according to the GPS coordinates that were taken, that would be an accurate depiction of where that body was actually found.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now again, Detective, it's your understanding you will be called later in this trial. We'll ask you a lot more questions.
may proceed.
Okay, thank you. So let me just back up a little bit and just make sure everyone understands what we're about to show here. You created a report, and it was based on your analysis of the defendant's cell phone record, which we've been referring to, including his NELOS data, correct?
Correct.
Also, Sasha Krause's cell phone information.
Correct.
That's also an AT&T record that we've shown. And then you were also given information regarding some photos that were taken from the defendant's cell phone device. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Also some financial information from American Express.
Yes.
And a receipt from a McDonald's in Kayenta. Is that right?
Yes.
And all that information you put together into a PowerPoint to be able to show to the jury today.
Yes. There was also some data from driving through the security checkpoints at Luke Air Force Base.
That's right. We've had some testimony on that. That D-bids is what was referred to yesterday. All right. Do you have that prepared?
I do. I have both that KML and that PowerPoint ready to go.
Okay. And for the record, this is going to be Exhibit 1. $168 is the report, and I'll move to admit it at this time. That's noted.
The 168's admitted.
And then you refer to Kml files, Sev. Again, these are the files that you use with Google Earth to be able to map the data. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you'll be referring to those as well during your testimony. Is that right?
Yes. So the PowerPoint, you're going to see, I refer to them as video vignettes. So you're seeing an animation within Google Earth, and then there's also still shots with data, dates and times, what type of a connection was it. You'll see that as well. All of that is being produced in Google Earth. It's just captured in the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint doesn't give you the ability to like measure distances as an example. So I have both depending on what questions are asked.
The KML, for the record, is identified as 169. Not moving to admit that. Is that admitted? I'm sorry. 168 was admitted.
Yes, it was. You may.
Sure. So this guide will give you an understanding of when you see this location data on the map, well, what does it mean? So we kind of got to address this here a little bit. So in the case of the phone ending in 3215, we'll be using the color red to show that on the map. It looks like a little red lollipop. But that is what the icon that we will use to show the location of a cell site or that cell tower, depending on where it is. Anything in blue will be our victim's phone, Sasha's, ending in 0873. So again, the icon will look the same. Those are cell sites. Depending on the color, which device are we seeing? The next thing that we're going to get in there is an estimated handoff coverage area, and it's going to have this very strange shape to it, and I'm going to talk about that shape and what does it mean, but understand that that too will be color coordinated. So if I'm addressing a location of where a phone could be for a voice call as an example, or a text message or a data connection, if it's in reference to the phone ending in 3215, it'll be red. And if we're talking about the device ending in 0873, our victim, it'll be blue. Now, as far as that shape goes, it is a very unusual shape. We call this the horizontal plane, or for short, the H plane. And I've heard people refer to it as the blob or the amoeba, because it just has this really weird shape to it. What you're seeing here is radio waves in action. And the word they like to use is this is how they propagate. So the little black dot that you're seeing on there, that is the location of the antenna on top of like a tower for a cell site. That's where it's physically located, the antenna. Over 90%, well over 90% of all cell sites, whether they're on the side of a building, a water tower, a normal tower like we see on the interstate, all those antennas, over 90% of them are directionally based. And what it means is that antenna is facing a specific azimuth, a degree. That antenna is focused, and that would be the line being drawn off the black circle. That antenna may be faced 10 degrees or 20 degrees or 120 or 240, wherever the phone company has determined that their electrical engineers that have a specialty in radio theory, radio wave theory, RF theory, that antenna needs to point over there to support that populace, that neighborhood, that interstate, wherever this thing is located. So that's what we're going to see, because most of these cell sites, all the ones that we're going to see here, are going to be directionally based. And they call that a sector, like it's pointing towards a specific region. Through something called an Anechoic Chamber, which is just a very fancy name for a room inside a lab. If I want to go into the business to build antennas to put on a cell phone tower. I want Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T to buy my antenna. Well, they're going to demand to know, how is this thing going to perform? I'm not just going to buy that cold. You have to show me how this antenna performs before I'm going to put it on one of my towers. So I take my antenna, I put it in a room, in a lab, called an Anechoic Chamber. And I put it on one end of the room. I put a receiver that measures radio waves and can map them on the other end of the room. And I spin this thing around 360 degrees, both horizontally and vertically. And I map what the radio wave looks like when it propagates out of that antenna. And it's directionally based. So what we're seeing here, this weird shape, the cell site is located right here. And whatever this azimuth is, let's say it's due north, so it's going to face 0 degrees, straight due north. If I hit transmit on that cell site and it starts to transmit its signal due north at 0 degrees, the best quality signal is going to be along that azimuth line. As I get further away from that azimuth line, the signal starts to weaken. We get into side lobes and rear lobes. It is possible to be behind that antenna and still connect to it. And that's what these rear lobes are accounting for. Because since we can map those radio waves, this is the weird shape that they transmit at. This is your best quality signal out here. But you still have these side and rear lobes that you do have to account for. And we know that that's the shape because they scientifically mapped it in this anechoic chamber. And if it gets the results that they want, they're going to publish it in their data sheets for that particular antenna, and they blast it out to everybody. Hey, Verizon, here's the latest thing we just produced. T-Mobile, AT&T, look how good this performed. You need to buy our antenna. Well, what we've done is we've gotten the shapes of several of the largest, the most popular antenna manufacturers out there, and when you overlay them, that's the shape we're using. It's accounting for side lobes. It's accounting for rear lobes. And we are going to estimate that handoff range that I explained earlier. So not the coverage area, the handoff area. And this comes back to a very important thing to understand about your cell phone. It may not connect to the closest cell site. It may not connect to the most powerful cell site. It's going to connect to the best quality signal. What cell site, what sector, what antenna is giving us the best quality signal? How close it is could be a factor. How strong the power is, the wattage coming off of that cell site could be a factor, but it's going to connect to the best quality signal. So as an example, when we do the analogy about driving, I connect in the west side of Phoenix, and I'm going to drive all the way over to the east side of Phoenix, and I'm on a phone call the entire time. I could have 20, 25 handoffs. Every time we get a handoff where my phone call's transferred from one cell site to another, or a different sector, a different azimuth on the same cell site, what's happening is the quality of signal changed. The network, your phone's monitoring the network. It's talking to the network all the time. You connected to this sector on this cell site because it was the best quality signal. And then as you traveled, your phone said, uh-oh, that one's degrading. I can see this one too. It's starting to come up. And as soon as that quality of signal just barely changes by a decibel, that phone's going to jump. Now I'm on this cell site because that's the best quality signal. And your phone is constantly monitoring the network for best quality signal, even when you're not on it. It's constantly monitoring that network for that best quality signal. This is how we're going to represent where that device is at.
Seb, can I ask a dumb question?
Sure.
If I'm in that area, that H plane, on my cell phone, is it going to connect to that tower then? Or is that where you're saying it could connect to a different tower?
Well, during a particular period at time, down arguably to the second, that is the cell site and sector your phone connected to because that's what's in the records. So we're marking that, looking at that raw data in the records, that's where we're getting that information. The records give us the lat long, the location of the cell site, where the little black dot, where the little lollipop will be. The records also tell us it's on a specific azimuth. So we get the location of the cell site, and then it tells us, oh, your azimuth line needs to be on 10 degrees or 40 degrees or 80 degrees, whatever the records say. So that's how we can articulate that and show it on the map.
That's how you can get a little more accurate. So if I'm outside of that H plane, outside the dotted lines, am I connecting with that tower at all?
Yes, potentially, because at the end of the day, this is an estimate. This is like a best quality estimate of where you are in that footprint, that horizontal footprint. As an example, best case scenario. You've all experienced this. You're traveling on a straight road, but the road's going through terrain that has dips, and then it comes back up, and then it has dips, and then it comes back up. If you've ever been on a voice call, you come up to the top of the hill, everything's working, sounds great. When you go back down to the bottom of that hill and you have a hill behind you and in front of you and you're in a low spot, maybe it even drops the call. Or it's just you can't hear each other very well. You come back up and you're good to go. That effect is called shadowing. And it is the #1 thing in the environment that will degrade your signal. Shadowing. Think of radio waves like light waves. If I took off that antenna and instead of shooting out radio waves, I put a big searchlight in place. So light and radio waves are very, very closely related. If the light would have a shadow because there's a mountain, a big building, your radio waves would have a shadow on the other side. So as an example, even though the azimuth line is your best quality signal, if I put a 20-story concrete building between that cell site and you right here, and I put that building right here, or I put a mountain, you may not have any connection to this. This is arguably best case scenario. This is the lab result of a perfect environment in that anechoic chamber. Think lab. But in reality, everything gets a vote in the environment. Rainstorms, snow, temperature, these buildings, trees will absorb radio waves sometimes. Just depends. So all those little factors will play in. So this is an estimate. However, due to the amount of time we've been doing this and doing millions of drive test scans so we know how these networks function, this estimate is well within over 90% accurate for the location of where that cell site or that cell phone is located.
All right, thank you. Can you show what that looks like with terrain? Oh, there you go.
Sure. So this isn't NELOS, to be clear. This is what, for AT&T, This is what a phone call could look like, or a text message, or a data connection. And what we're seeing here, and this one does have handoffs. So what we're seeing here is the phone can connect to a cell site located here. There's a physical location of the cell site. As an example, there's Farmington, New Mexico. The little blue lines here, there's your four corners. So Utah up to the northwest. Right here we have Colorado. In this area right here, there's Arizona, and here's New Mexico. Now, along that Arizona-New Mexico border, west of Farmington, it is very rural, and there's not a whole lot out there. So the density of cell sites, like how many cell sites are around me, is very, very thin. This is vastly different than, say, the middle of Phoenix. You are completely surrounded very, very closely by cell sites everywhere in heavy urban area. This is rural. So these H-planes are going to be big. We're covering these cell sites up here that's the northwestern corner of Colorado. These cell sites will cover all the way down to Highway 160, which goes from New Mexico into Arizona. The direct line, we're talking 30 plus miles. So this is what happens in rural areas. If you were traveling with continuous H-planes from the east all the way across the west, we would just get H-plane, 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 H-plane. If it was kept handing off during a voice call or a text message. Very large breadcrumbs. These things are going to cover miles across. But this is how we can map the physical area of where you were. Now, granted, this is very rural, so this area is covering miles across here. But in the records, you connected this cell site, you were on this azimuth, which means you were on that sector for that particular contact. In Google Earth, there's a bar up in the upper left-hand corner that they refer to as the timeline slider bar. And this is what we can use to control where we are in any given set of records, whether it's a set of Google data or Facebook location data or your phone records. We can control where we are and what we're seeing on the map, or how much data. Am I looking at 2 minutes worth of data or 7 hours? So we can adjust that with the timeline slider bar. I refer to them as the lollipops because it's very easy to understand. But the cell site icon, it looks like a little stick with the color representing a specific device. That is what we're going to use for the physical location of where that tower is, or the location of that cell site. Sometimes you may see the same number and the word last. All that means is that was the last connection for a long voice call or a data connection. The numbers themselves, these random numbers that we see on the screen, 1048, 1049, 1045, those numbers represent the row numbers in the raw data. So if I had a question about this H-plane right here, and I'm looking at two different row numbers, I can go to the raw data for this particular report. I know I go down to row number 1048, 1049, and there I can see the raw data for that created this image for these records.
So just to clarify, that raw data you're talking about, we presented 183 a moment ago, showed all that text, and it had those rows. Is that what you're referring to?
That is correct. This is basically the visualization of that raw data and putting it on a map.
And you could correspond that that number with the particular row in that data, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
The shaded area represents that estimated handoff location of where the device is at. If I took this device and we looked at it down in Phoenix, that H-plane is going to be noticeably smaller. It may only be a quarter mile across or a half a mile, much, much smaller. Because remember, best quality signal. We are seeing the network in action. That is registering the best quality signal. A place like Phoenix or downtown Flagstaff, that's a competitive environment. There's a fight amongst these cell sites for AT&T or for Verizon, whatever provider you're on, to see who's going to be that best quality signal. And that's a dense area, lots of cell sites. It's very competitive for the best quality signal. So if you're moving around, we see a lot of handoffs. This is not a competitive environment. There's not that many cell sites out here. And what's interesting, because of that area we're at, we're about to drive into, if you're traveling to the west, you're about to go into the Navajo Nation's right over here, and it goes down for miles. We're about to lose connection to all AT&T cell sites. There's none down there. So this is the edge area before AT&T is about to stop with cell sites. If you were traveling to the southwest, you're not going to see another AT&T cell site till you get closer to Flagstaff, which is some hours of driving. As an example, this would be an H-plane for the device in the shaded area, red for the device ending in 32115. At the time for that particular incident, because we have the timeline slide bar, was 2054. That would be 8:54 p.m. As an example, on the evening of January 18th, 2020. We can also see the victim's phone, and the color will clearly change. So now, instead of red, it's blue. We get the 6703 number again, which is the raw. If we went to Sasha's records and we went down to row 6703, there's the raw data that tells us, oh, this is on a cell site located up in southwestern Colorado. There's the azimuth, the direction, and it's pointed down towards Highway 160. And if we see the last, we're seeing first and the last time that it was on that particular cell site. Again, there's the estimated handoff area, and in this case, because it's blue, that's representing Sasha's device 0873. And we know that this one occurred at 2053, 8:53 p.m. on that same date, January 18th, 2020. When multiple colors are seen at the same time, it represents that activity during that time period. And we'll talk about like how much time are we looking at here? Is this a few minutes? Is it an hour or two? Like how much activity is on there? But this is how they can interact together when we get multiple records on the map at the same time. So as an example, around this time period, on the January 18th, we're seeing both devices. We have Sasha's device in blue, we have the 3215 in red, but also we've got some dots right here, really small dots right around Highway 60. Those are not phone calls, those are not text messages, those are not data connections. That's the NELOS location data. And that's going to be a little bit different. So when we talk about this data, you're going to get the raw records give us that lat long, latitude, longitude. And that is just like GPS, that's what GPS uses. This is going to work a little bit differently though. This isn't, like I said before, assisted GPS, meaning that your phone has to actively be doing something to be using GPS in order for NELOS to take advantage of it. Whatever that app is, the more GPS is being utilized, the more accurate this data can get. Additionally, not only will you get the dot for the lat long, but you will also get a radius. And AT&T is going to throw numbers in here, 25 meters, 50 meters. Arguably, the biggest you can ever see is 35,000 meters of a radius, which is a significantly large area. And this is AT&T's version of this. You have to be careful when analyzing this data because there's more than one database giving us this information. There's two. I've already talked about the first one, that assisted GPS. Well, what happens if the other database is starting to kick in? And the other database is called timing. You all actually have either heard of or learned in school some of the principles behind timing. But timing is literally like a guy standing somewhere with a stopwatch. And we are going to time a round trip. How long does it take for something to go from point A to point B and back? What is that time? That's called timing. In the case of sonar, like with a bat or with a submarine, they emit a sound, it goes out, it reflects off of something, it comes back, and a bat or the sonar guy on a submarine internally are running some sort of a stopwatch. And they're like, oh, that took this much time, that cave wall, that other submarine's this far away. The longer it takes to get that signal back, the further away the object is. The quicker that happens, the closer the object is. AT&T can do this. They have timing. But this isn't sound waves. Sound waves are actually pretty slow. Remember, radio waves are like light. How fast does light travel? That's fast. That's how fast radio waves travel. So we're talking nanoseconds. They've got this down to nanoseconds. Your phone sends a signal out, not a voice call, not a text message, not a data connection. Your phone's doing this constantly because Verizon and T-Mobile also use timing. Your phone sends a signal out to the cell site with the best quality signal. It hits that cell site on that sector that you're communicating to, best quality signal, and it comes back to your phone. And a little stopwatch in nanoseconds is timing how long does that round trip take. The longer it takes, the further away from the cell site you are, the quicker it takes, the closer to the cell site you are. But here's the issue. AT&T, Verizon and T-Mobile, especially Verizon, have their timing down to just absolute precision. When they say you're on this cell site, on this sector, on that azimuth, and you're 1.3 miles away from the cell site, 1.3 miles, very accurate. But those other providers don't use assisted GPS. AT&T does. They lean heavily on that. So their timing, they don't have it dialed up very well. So there's times, especially when you get into a location where the AT&T network is thin, and we're, in this case, like going the Four Corners area, it's about to disappear. That timing is going to get a little sketchy. But if a device is actively using GPS, that NELOS is going to be really dialed in because it has assisted GPS. But we can't forget that that timing is still doing its thing, but it's going to be sketchy. And there's going to be some hits based off of timing that are going to be inaccurate. There's going to be some. There always are. We refer to those as flyers, and we can see them. They're obvious in the records. But when the records in totality clearly show, because of assisted GPS, the location of where a device is, we can explain the inaccuracies, especially if you're in an area where that AT&T network may not be working all that great for timing because of the remoteness, the lack of AT&T cell sites in the area. So that's NELOS, strictly location data. Technically, if your phone was actively had an app running in the background, IM Messenger on Facebook runs in the background if you leave it on. You could plug your phone in at night, put it on your nightstand next to your bed, no incoming or outgoing activity at all, none. No voice calls, no text messages, no data connections, but still get NELOS location data for that device.
So, I think we're almost out of break, but let me ask you a couple questions before we break. Regarding the navigation app, so if, in this case, we already referenced, we have Sasha's cell phone information, we have the defendant's cell phone information. If the defendant had been using Google Maps, for instance, would that have made the NELOS more accurate?
It absolutely will. Any app that is actively plugging into GPS signals from those satellites, the more we get navigation, as an example, every second on the second, is really going to help that NELOS get really, really dialed in. If the phone isn't actively using GPS, that NELOS can be very sparse.
Judge, I know there's quite a bit of more to talk about. I don't know if you wanted to take a break now.
I think it'd be a good time to take a break. We've been going almost an hour and a half, not quite, just a few minutes shy of that. So we will take our morning recess of 15 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please remember the admonition. Do not talk to anyone about the case. Do not let anyone talk to you about the case. That, of course, includes each other. Please keep an open mind about the case. Please do not form any opinions about the case. And we'll stand in recess 15 minutes. Please be seated. Council, anything further before we take our recess? All right, stand in recess, 15 minutes. You can step down if you wish. Yes, and that they can tell you if they haven't shown you where one is. They can let, Mr. Barker could let you know, or maybe Ms. Schaller where the restrooms are. Do you mind? Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Michelle. All right.